Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Jet Foundation's Community Workshop Series. We are going to wait here a few seconds and allow some other attendees to get on. Just stay with us for a minute or two. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, again. Thank you so much for joining our community webinar series at Jet Foundation. My name is Danielle Edwards, and I'm the Director of Engagement. As some of you may already know, our community webinar series is to help ensure our Duchenne community is better prepared on relevant educational topics. While I wish we could be doing this in person at our traditional family workshops, I'm so glad to be able to provide you with these virtual webinars. Today, I'm so excited to have Leo, Gardner, and Suzanne from NS Pharma, who will be presenting today an overview on exon skipping and an update on their company to the community. Please make sure to drop any questions you may have for them in the chat section below so that they can answer questions after the presentation. With that being said, we're so excited that you all were able to join us today for this webinar and hope you enjoy it. Now I'll pass it over to you, Leo, to begin.
Great. Actually, I will begin. Hello, it's Gardner Gendron. I'm the head of commercial at NS Pharma. I've been in the industry for, I don't know, 25 years, and I'm excited to bring this company introduction and our first product to you guys today. I want to say thank you to the Jet Foundation for allowing us this opportunity to speak directly to you. With that, let's jump right into the presentation. So Leo, the next slide. So our educational objectives today will be to introduce NS Pharma to you, understand the etiology of Duchenne and the clinical role of Dystrophin, and explain exon skipping therapy and how it works. Provide information on NS support, a very valuable service, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end. Next slide. Yeah, so one of the things that I'm passionate about is helping these young boys live a more productive life. I also share the values from NS Pharma and our subsidiary, Nippon Shinyaku. We believe the potential of new novel therapies, focus our research in these areas, such as our exon skipping technology for Duchenne. We recently launched a product, Viltepso, which is for 53 amendable Duchenne patients, and that's including exon 52 deletion. With that, we've offered a set of services where we are redefining the way patients and healthcare providers fight rare disease. We take pride in our drive for innovation. We take pride in our ability to help these patients live healthier lives. It's something we're passionate about at NS Pharma. We are part of a 100-year-old subsidiary company in Japan. We've been in the US for 20 years, and we have a vast pipeline. We're a very, very private company, and you will see our pipeline discussions broaden in the near future. We'll communicate more of those to you. So with that, next slide. Yeah, so this is the easy part for me. So I get to introduce both Dr. Leo Pratt and Dr. Suzanne Morgan to carry on the rest of the presentation. I'll leave you in their capable hands. Look forward to answering any questions you guys have at the end of the presentation, and thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks, Gardner. Hello, everyone. As Gardner mentioned, I'm Leo Pratt, one of the medical science liaisons with NS Pharma. Just wanted to echo his comments and just say a big thank you to the community and to the JET Foundation for allowing us to present today. And as I transition now into introducing you all, or providing rather, a background of one of our key focus areas, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, just wanted to make sure I gave that brief introduction of myself. So what is Duchenne? DMD, it is a rare pediatric neuromuscular condition that predominantly affects males. It's estimated that the range is every 1 in 3,500 to 1 in 5,000 males who are born are impacted by this condition. And although it does, again, primarily affect men because of the fact that the gene which encodes for the dystrophin protein that's often deficient and unfunctional in these patients, it is carried on the X chromosome. So that is one of the key reasons why you will find mostly males impacted by this condition. However, in the extremely rare circumstance, girls or females can also be what we call manifesting carriers, where the disease does affect them. However, generally speaking, when they are manifesting, the symptoms that they're clinically presenting with are often much milder than a male patient with this condition or this disease. And although it is, again, a rare pediatric disorder, it is considered to be the most commonly inherited childhood muscular condition. When we look at the patient journey, looking at the two graphs on the right, first we have Duchenne, of course. We see that the average age of symptoms first being noticed, and some of these symptoms we'll touch on later on in the presentation, but these could be symptoms like a Gower sign or a Gower's maneuver. These would be where the child may have difficulty standing up from a supine position. They may have to walk their hands up their legs to stand up, or symptoms like toe walking, where you may notice the child not walking flat on their feet, but mostly kind of on their tippy toes, or having an altered gait when they're walking. Again, these are not a comprehensive list of symptoms, and the symptoms that I just listed may not all be very pronounced. They may be subtle, but often they are first noticed right around age 2.5, so just under age 3. And the diagnosis that we're seeing is often a little bit delayed, about 1.5 years after those symptoms are first noticed. Now, in the case of a Becker patient, this would be more relevant for what we have here listed on the slide, a manifesting carrier. Again, for a girl in a very extremely rare case who may present with symptoms, often it is much milder, and it would present often like a Becker muscular dystrophy patient. Again, it's just another form of muscular dystrophy, but as we see, just looking at the patient journey here, it's milder in their disease progression, and often symptoms and diagnosis don't typically occur until later on, where in this case, we see a Becker patient, their first symptoms being first observed around age 7, and the diagnosis again being a little bit delayed around just under age 10. Now, I referenced just a moment ago, that patients with Duchenne often lack functional dystrophin protein. So I wanted to take a moment to really share with you what is the normal structure and function of this very critical protein for these patients. So dystrophin is a multi-domain protein expressed in a variety of tissues and organ systems. It's expressed in several different muscle tissues. We see here it's in the skeletal muscle, cardiac, and smooth muscles, as well as it also has a presence in the CNS system. We see that the multi-domain component is referencing, if you look here on this graph, in blue, we have the dystrophin protein. On one portion or one domain really is the N-terminus, which is the actin binding domain. And then we have the middle domain, which consists of multiple sub-repeating units. And then we have a C-terminus, which helps to bind to transmembrane proteins that the muscle cell has. In essence, what we're looking at here is a normal dystrophin protein in a patient without Duchenne, and we see that the C-terminus is able to bind to these transmembrane proteins to make what they call the dystrophin glycoprotein complex, or the DGC for short. And when this is fully intact, as it is in this picture, what we see is a stabilization of the muscle cell membrane, and that leads to strengthening and protection of the muscle cell membrane, preventing it from injury as our muscles normally contract and relax. However, for patients with Duchenne, when they lack the functional dystrophin protein, there is instability in that muscle cell membrane, and that can lead to rupturing and lead to inflammation, and also some of the other clinical manifestations that we'll get into in the next slide. So some of those clinical manifestations that we see, because we just learned a few moments ago that dystrophin protein is expressed in so many different tissue groups and organ systems, having a lack of that protein can impact those different systems negatively. So we see a loss of muscle mass, leading to inflammation as well, for affecting the skeletal muscle. We see a weakening of the diaphragm, which can require a ventilator and ultimately lead to pneumonia if unmanaged. Looking at the cardiac impact, we see a decreased heart function and ultimately cardiomyopathy. So these are some of the different manifestations that I'm referring to as the disease progresses. But just to give you an overview of the journey for these patients, often they first experience a decrease in muscle function, primarily in the upper extremities. So when I say the upper extremities, I'm referring to like the arms first, before they start to experience a loss of muscle function in the lower extremity in their legs, which can ultimately lead to, unfortunately, a loss of ambulation and becoming wheelchair bound. And then as these different organ systems are impacted, we see a progression of the disease, leading to ultimately respiratory and cardiac dysfunction. Now, looking at the overall average life expectancy for these patients, we have seen it extend to around age 30 or even up to age 40. And that is due to improvements in the therapies over the last 3 decades. I'm just looking at the patient journey here again by age. We see, again, minor symptoms. So some of the symptoms we mentioned earlier, like toe walking, the Gowers maneuver, again, they may be more pronounced, so they may be minor or more subtle, but they are often seen right around age 2.5, so just within the first 3 years of the patient's life. And then as they get a little bit older, we do see some more manifestations start to occur, some more, again, symptoms like the decrease in the upper extremity muscle function, and then the next would be the lower extremity, their legs. And then we see, again, as they enter into young adulthood and teenage years, the different organ systems that can be impacted, and why it is so important that we have a comprehensive multidisciplinary team involved in the management for these patients that has also contributed to the extension of their lifespan. So continuing on with the topic of the importance of having a involved, comprehensive multidisciplinary team, we can see, starting off in the center here, the patient, of course, being supported by their family and their caregivers, who ideally are seeking the care of a clinical care coordinator, or who is really the gatekeeper. As we can see, they help these patients with arranging and coordinating meetings with the different specialties. So some of these specialties, as we see reflected here in these black bubbles on the outer circle, include multiple different groups, such as physical therapy and rehabilitation management, psychosocial management, cardiac management, respiratory specialists, nutritionists and GI specialists. All of these different disciplines play a very important role in the successful management of our Duchenne patients. And on the outside of the circle, we see some of the different tools and interventions that these different disciplines can utilize, again, to successfully manage these patients throughout their journey. Now, as we discuss more about what treatment options now are available to these patients, and then we get into the topic later on about exon skipping, I first wanted to share with you historically how patients have been managed. Unfortunately, at this time, there is no cure for Duchenne. Most of the treatments that have been available have been palliative, so they have not necessarily targeted the underlying molecular cause of the disease, but really helped treat the adverse effects associated with the progressive nature of their condition. And so some of those treatments include pharmacologic interventions such as corticosteroids. Many of this is something you all may be familiar with, but these are considered to be the mainstay or cornerstone of treatment. These help to reduce the skeletal muscle inflammation that patients often experience, again, due to the disruption of that muscle cell membrane from the lack of functional dystrophin that they have. Other pharmacologic interventions include some cardiac medications like ACE inhibitors or beta blockers. These help to slow the deterioration of the cardiac muscle tissue and help to delay the time to cardiac failure. There are also non-pharmacologic interventions as well, and those include respiratory and physical therapy for both lung and muscle function respectively. So again, this is just a reiteration of the involvement from so many different disciplines for patients with this condition. So now I'm going to share with you exon skipping as a treatment strategy for patients with Duchenne. This is one of the disease-modifying therapies that has recently been approved as of today's date. There are currently 4 approved exon skipping drugs or antisense oligonucleotides. But in general, I'm going to share with you how these drugs work mechanistically. So in this first slide, I'm going to share with you what does normal synthesis of dystrophin protein look like. This would be in a person without Duchenne. So what does it normally look like when you have functional dystrophin protein? So of course, we start off with DNA containing all of our genetic information, including the gene that encodes for the dystrophin protein. That gene is then transcribed to pre-messenger RNA. And in pre-messenger RNA, we have exons, which are the protein coding regions of the pre-messenger RNA. These are reflected here in blue by these different puzzle-shaped pieces. And then orange, as it's shown on the slide, are the introns, which are the non-protein coding regions of our pre-messenger RNA. These help link the exons together. Now, as the process matures and RNA splicing takes place, RNA splicing is where we see removal of the introns. So the non-protein coding regions are removed or spliced away, and we end up with mature messenger RNA where we see a fully intact reading frame due to, again, this patient not having any mutation in their genetic code. So we see a full length messenger RNA containing a full reading frame that is then able to be translated by the ribosome to produce a full length, fully functional dystrophin protein that we can use for muscle function. So this is what the process normally looks like without Duchenne. In the next slide, I'll share with you what can result in a patient with Duchenne. We see, again, starting off with DNA containing all of our genetic information, including the gene that encodes for the dystrophin protein. However, in this patient, that gene has been mutated, and that mutation is transcribed into pre-messenger RNA. And we see, in this case, the mutation is a deletion mutation, which accounts for about 70% of mutations in Duchenne, where we see missing blue puzzle pieces. Again, those blue puzzle pieces being the exons or the protein coding regions that I was referring to earlier. Due to this mutation, we can see that these 2 puzzle pieces here do not fit together. So as a result, as the process continues and RNA splicing takes place, there is a disruption in the reading frame in messenger RNA because, again, these 2 exons don't fit together. So the ribosome is not able to fully translate the message, and so as a result, this patient would have a shortened, non-functional dystrophin protein. This is what is generally happening in the case for a patient with Duchenne. Now, one way to treat that or resolve this is through exon skipping, again, being one of the approved treatment strategies for patients with this condition that targets a particular exon in pre-messenger RNA, depending on the compound that you're referring to. So again, starting off with DNA, we have the mutation for this Duchenne patient where they have a deletion mutation, where again, one or more of their exons are missing. However, they are receiving, in this situation, an antisense oligonucleotide. That is referring to the AON here. That is the exon skipping therapy. And it is specifically targeting a exon in pre-messenger RNA. And as a result of that binding in pre-messenger RNA, we see restoration of the reading frame in messenger RNA, where now we see these two puzzle pieces fitting together, represented here if you follow my cursor. So as a result of this patient with Duchenne receiving an exon skipping therapy, that patient's ribosome is able to translate to produce a shortened but still fully functional dystrophin protein. So we are seeing a shift from this patient from a very severe phenotype to more of a milder disease where they still have a genetic mutation, because again, these exon skipping therapies are not curing them, but it is allowing them to restore the dystrophin protein that the patient was previously lacking. So looking at the overall landscape for this condition, I mentioned earlier that there are, as of today's date, 4 approved antisense oligonucleotides or 4 exon skipping therapies approved by the FDA targeting 3 key exons, 51, 53, and 45. Looking at the graph on the right, we see that overall, those that have a mutation amenable to exon 53 skipping represents about 8 to 10% of the Duchenne population. Those who are amenable to an exon 51 skipping therapy would be around 13% of patients. And those who have a mutation amenable to exon 45 skipping is about 8% of Duchenne patients. So in total, we're looking at around just under 30% of patients have a mutation that is amenable to one of the 3 therapies that is currently approved. There's still a need, of course, to treat the additional 70% of patients that have other mutations amenable to additional therapies that are not currently approved just yet. But Viltolarsen, which as Gardner touched on earlier, is an approved therapy by NS Pharma. It is a once weekly 80 milligram per kilogram, 1 hour infusion intended for the treatment of Duchenne patients who are amenable to exon 53 skipping therapy, as an example. Again, there are many different types of mutations that would be amenable to this treatment. They include patients who may have a deletion mutation from 3 through 52, 19 through 52, 45 through 52, 52 alone. Or on the flip side of 53, such as 54 through 58 or deletion from 54 through 61. Again, it's not a comprehensive list, but it's just to share with you that there are many types of mutations that can be amenable to this type of therapy. In order to figure out which one may work best for your child, you can certainly refer to several resources. They include, one, your provider, who will certainly help guide you in the direction of which treatment option will be most suitable for the child. And you can also refer to online resources such as Jet Foundation. Online on their website, they do have a chart that does show some of the most common exon skippable mutations. So I did want to just share with you the current indication and important safety information, since I did touch on Viltepso as one of the 4 treatment options for patients with this disease. So I touched on that Viltepso which is the brand name for Viltolarsen injection, is FDA approved and indicated for the treatment of Duchenne patients who have a confirmed genetic mutation in the DMG gene that is amenable to exon 53 skipping. That indication is approved under accelerated approval based on an increase in our biomarker, which was the dystrophin production observed in patients who were treated in the Viltepso clinical development program. Continued approval for this indication may be contingent, however, upon verification and description of a clinical benefit in a confirmatory trial, which is currently ongoing. As far as the important safety information, I did want to touch on that Viltepso did not show any kidney toxicity in patients in the clinical development program. However, certain renal tests are guided to be done both before initiating treatment and throughout treatment periodically. And so some of those tests include a serum cystatin C, urine dipstick, and urine protein to creatinine ratio. Looking at the adverse events in our label, the most commonly reported adverse reactions included upper respiratory symptoms like cough and nasal congestion, injection site reactions such as some maybe slight bruising at the site of injection, as well as cough and pyrexia. However, all of the adverse events that you see listed here were shown to be mild to moderate in severity. So with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Suzanne Morgan, who will share some more information about one of our patient support services programs called NS Support.
Thank you, Leo. Thanks for that great presentation, and Gardner for that great introduction. Like Leo said, my name is Suzanne Morgan, and I am the Director of Patient Access Services at NS Pharma. Thank you, Jet Foundation, for this opportunity to talk about NS Support. Next slide. So we know at NS Pharma that when a diagnosis of Duchenne's is given, it can be quite overwhelming. And so we wanted to make sure that we created a support program that was there to help the patients and the caregivers, also the healthcare providers, for every step of the way. Whether the patient is 4 or 24, we want to meet you wherever you are in the journey to help with medical information, any sort of health plan information, and obviously verification of the benefits. What NS Support offers is, once we know the insurance benefits, a rapid benefit verification. Also, we have a copay assistance available for those patients with commercial insurance. Also, this, like Leo said, this is an infusion, and so we are able to help secure a site of care, whether it's the hospital outpatient department, infusion center, home infusion, or even physician's office. And then finally, we give calls to the caregiver and the patient to give you updates on your case to see where you are in each step of this journey. Thank you. Next slide. So who is the actual NS Support team? We have a fabulous team. We have a team of case managers, directors of patient access, and also a patient engagement lead. And so our case managers, their role is to provide ongoing support to help manage your access, understand what your reimbursement information is, what your benefits are, communicate that to the patient and to the caregivers. Our directors of patient access, we have an internal team here with over 100 years of combined experience. These ladies have experience in managing practices. They've been infusion nurses, they have been pharmacists, and also medical coders. And so together as a group, they assist the healthcare provider to kind of troubleshoot the journey, finding ways to gain access, finding ways to transfer patients from, let's say, a hospital outpatient department for the first infusions to home infusion for the subsequent infusions. So this team is fabulous and dynamic and there to help the provider. And finally, the newest role is the patient engagement lead. And this lead is there absolutely for the patient to help coordinate benefits, overcome obstacles, answer questions, give reinforcement, and just be there for the patients and caregivers specifically, as this journey can be a bit arduous at times and lengthy. So next slide, Leo. So this schematic is what I would like to call the patient journey, and you can see a little road here with several stops. So with NS support, it all starts with something we call the start form. And the start form is a form that the physician can fill out. It will require the patient's information, the patient's insurance information, also the provider's information. And this, once the start form is faxed into NS support, our case managers then take that information and start to verify the benefit. And what I mean by that is they call the insurance plan, whether it's Cigna or Anthem or even a Medicaid plan. And they start to ask several questions about the benefits. What's the copay? What is the deductible? Is Viltepso covered? Where can you get access? And they will also find different areas to find access. Sometimes there's different costs associated with where you get this infusion. And so the case managers will get all of that information. And then if you look at the third little flag there for explanation of benefits, they will then place a welcome call to the caregiver and patient, letting you know what your benefits are and what your out-of-pocket costs may be for Viltepso. Also where you can get infused and where your insurance will cover that. They're also able to answer any questions regarding that. And if you do have commercial insurance at that point, they will automatically enroll you in our copay program. So once the welcome call has taken place, often the insurers nationally require something called a prior authorization. And this is a form where the insurance agencies just like to know a little bit more information about where the patient's at in this journey. They'll ask things like certain clinical information, maybe a walk test, maybe some labs, and everything is put onto this prior authorization form that the physician actually fills out on behalf of the patient. Once that gets faxed into the specific insurance companies such as Cigna or Anthem or United, whoever, NS support then helps watch that prior authorization to provide any help. We check the payer to see if there's been a decision made, and we let the provider and the patients know where we are with that prior authorization. If the prior authorization gets approved, then we go to the next little flag and we find out exactly where you might want to get infused. Often this is where the directors of patient access will be helping your provider secure the site of care, whether it's home infusion or a hospital outpatient department, so you will know where to go for your first infusion. Often, or actually sometimes, even though we have good coverage nationally, sometimes we have to do an appeal on that prior authorization. They're denied. Not uncommon, but if an appeal is necessary, NS support also helps provide the support. We check with the payer. We provide the additional information that the healthcare provider or the patient caregiver may need to submit to the insurance. Often they just want a little more information to make sure it's the appropriate therapy for that patient. And we are there to help with that service also. And then finally, throughout this journey, as you can see from the start through the prior authorizations and appeals, we are giving you calls often, or if you just like to know when there's something new, we just give you a call for that too. So we provide a lot of ongoing support with our case managers that are regionally specific. So you will always have the same case manager, and so with the provider. So you will always have that same person and feel comfortable with that. Next slide. So whether you have commercial insurance, government insurance such as Medicaid, whether you have a combination of the two, NS support has different programs to help you gain access to Viltepso. All we need to do is get that start form in, and then we can verify to see what your coverage is and then determine the next steps whether or not you need any support. Next slide. So like I mentioned earlier, if you do have commercial insurance, we have something called a copay. Cover the cost of Viltepso at a zero copay for you. This copay program covers up to $20,000 of your out-of-pocket costs per year, which helps hit your deductibles and etc., so that you can gain access to Viltepso. You are automatically re-enrolled every year as long as you're eligible. And like I said, once we have determined your eligibility, you are automatically enrolled. We will give you that copay card during your welcome, when you get your welcome letter. And you can take that either to your site of care, or NS support will call the site of care and provide that copay ID, whatever is easiest. Next slide. And so often there's still some outside costs that need to be covered. And so NS support can help get you in touch with different foundations that can help with different aspects of the cost of Duchenne. So perhaps you need nursing support. There are foundations that can help with that. And there, or a wheelchair, et cetera. We can connect you with the different foundations also. And for those patients that have no insurance, we do have a patient assistance program that we will check eligibility, and if you are eligible, then the cost of Viltepso would be absolutely free. Next slide. So all of this information I've just given starts with this form right here called our START form. As I said, the physician can fill this out with the patient information. Two things about this form though that's necessary is we will absolutely need the physician's signature on this form. We'll also need the patient's signature. However, often we know in the times of COVID that sometimes the patients aren't always there to sign. So we do provide a DocuSign capability where we will send you an email and you can sign remotely via DocuSign on this form to get your verification started. You can download this form at viltepso.com, or you can call NS support at 833-NS-SUPRT to obtain this form too. Next slide. And so in summary of the NS support program, it all starts with that START form. And we have a fabulous team of case managers, directors of patient access, and patient engagement leads that can help throughout this journey, whether it's the provider or whether it's the patient, whatever your question might be, we are here to help. We're absolutely here to support you. We also have the copay and the patient assistance program to help with any financial needs you may have. And then also as far as the services go, like I mentioned, we have a very rapid benefit investigation where we will figure out what your benefits are and get back to you within a day or two on that. We will also explain what those benefits are. And like I said, also, we will help with the prior authorization assistance and also appeal assistance if that should happen. And then finally, we provide the ongoing communication through our case managers and the patient engagement lead to make sure you know exactly where you are in the journey. Final slide. So this is the number, once again, and support. And that's the conclusion of my portion of this program. So if there's any questions I can answer, I would love to help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys for that presentation. That was fantastic. As Suzanne just said, questions now are open. I know we've had a few come through already, so I can kind of start. Can Dr. Pratt or Dr. Grundon comment on upcoming exon skipping therapies for NS Pharma, more exon 44 skipping drug? How close are you to starting that clinical trial in the United States is one question we have.
Sure, I'll start off that question. So thank you for asking that. NS Pharma is committed to developing treatments for the Duchenne community. And so the next compound that is in development is for patients, or is our exon 44 skipping program. However, as far as the timeline, I'm not able to share any details at this moment, but it would, any exact details, I should say, but we're looking at near the end of this year recruiting in the US or early next year.
Okay, great.
I can add to that also. So we gained approval for Viltepso, our 53 amendable in Japan first, and then the US. We committed to a phase 3 program for Viltepso, Razor 53. We're recruiting for right now. The Exon 44 program is on the government trials.gov. And we have a bunch of programs that are cross Duchenne. We're a very private company, and we will be adding those to our pipeline page and communicating out to the patient advocacy groups at some time in the near future. Right now, we don't have any further information. We are committed to provide new, novel therapies in this space with an unmet medical need. We are funding a ton of programs in this area, and we're going to partner with the community for some time going forward. Sorry, I don't have more to give for you today, but I'm working very hard to be able to communicate that to you in a very near future. Thanks.
Great. Another great resource too for families is to follow their pages on LinkedIn, or sign up for their newsletter, follow the website, kind of things like that as well to keep in mind as they do continue providing updates with future drug development pipelines or things like that moving forward. All right, another question we do have from the audience is this treatment affected with a stop codon on exon 19?
So thank you for that question. The introduction of a premature stop codon would be more associated with the nonsense mutation, so it's a different mutation type. And right now, Viltepso does not treat patients with nonsense mutations.
Okay. Will there be opportunities in the UK for the Exon trial too? If not, will there be an opportunity to attend a US site?
Another good question. So currently, as Gardner mentioned, we do have a confirmatory phase 3 trial that is ongoing. There are some sites that are still recruiting. That study is a global study as well, I should note. In the UK specifically, I just checked on clinicaltrials.gov, and currently there is no site in the UK. However, we do have a few other European sites. Those sites include one in Spain, the Netherlands, and also in Italy.
Just to go off of that one, if someone's child is eligible for Viltepso, are they able to leave the UK and attend the US for a site to get drug?
That's based on a provider, securing access through a provider in the US. I think we've seen that happen several times. So best thing to do would be to start the conversation by enrolling in our NS support services. We'll be able to communicate specifics on a case-by-case basis and hopefully provide options. It's not always 100% clear on this, and I think we're pursuing ex-US other countries labeling and access that way from a commercial perspective. We'll keep you updated as much as we can as we're moving to create access worldwide for Viltepso and its other products that are called on.
Another question. We're getting a lot of the Exon 44, which I think we've already touched on. Another one I will jump into that I think is really beneficial for the community here is if someone's son's exons are 45 through 50, are they amenable to Viltepso?
Another good question. So that particular deletion mutation, 45 through 50, is not one of the current, out of the many mutations amenable to exon 53 skipping, that one is not included. It would, in general, fall on either side of exon 53. So some of the examples that I touched on earlier would include like a deletion mutation from exon 3 through 52, 45 through 52, 50 through 52, or 52 alone. Or on the flip side of exon 53, such as like 54 through 58 deletion mutation, or 54 through 61. So that particular mutation, 45 through 50, unfortunately would not be amenable to therapy like Viltepso. I would recommend reaching out to the provider to learn more about what options would be available to that patient.
Great, thank you, Leo. Another one we have, and I feel like you guys touched on this, but When will we hear data from the current trial in Japan for the exon skipping of 44?
Yeah, so I mean, we are and just have released over 2-year long-term data set versus a projected age-matched cohort. And we continue to open up our data and present it as much as we can to make sure that we're progressing the science of Duchenne in a proper way and showing what the effect of our therapy is. We're very proud of our data set. Leo, do you want to be more specific, or do you have any other comment?
No, I would just echo yours. I mean, in terms of the program pipeline for the 44 program, I can't give out any exact details right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss it? Was it for 44 specifically?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was talking about the 53. Excuse me.
No problem, which I think is still a really good thing to, touch on as well. I think, if people are looking at some of that data or that information, I think, going back and referencing some of the 53, I think would be helpful to kind of read more about and learn more about, especially as they move forward on their programs.
Sure. I mean, I can share with the community that, we are looking at accelerating in every area we can. We have multiple programs that we're funding outside the 53. So 44 is the one that's on the trial, is on the trials website. We're setting up a regulatory pathway for each one of these programs, and we're trying to engage and get them to the market sooner, knowing that there's a huge unmet medical need, and we have a very solid platform for developing dystrophin restoration products for Duchenne. I hope that's legally correct. Leo, please jump in if that's not. And more to be followed. We're going to try to be a little bit more transparent on communicating this in the future.
Absolutely. My son is non-ambulatory. Is he eligible for exon skipping?
Another good question. I can comment that for Viltepso, according to our approved labeling, there are no age restrictions nor any ambulatory status restrictions. So patients of any age and whether or not they are wheelchair bound or not are eligible for therapy with Viltepso. However, and I'm sure Dr. Morgan can comment more on this, depending on the patient's insurer, there may be criteria for them to be ambulatory or not.
Yeah, that's a great question, and boy, one that we at NS Pharma, when we speak with our payers, we talk about this. So we're finding trends actually across the nation where plans are starting to realize that although ambulation is important and very important, there are still things that continue to be important. And so we're seeing actually a lot of the Medicaid plans not require ambulation to be able to get on a product like Viltepso. We still have a little bit of work with some of the national payers, and when I say that, I mean things like Anthem and Cigna and United. Some of those bigger payers are still sticking to our phase 2 data, which is a small cohort of 16 boys, and that's the data that they feel that they can make a policy on. So to answer your question, I think the best thing to do is, if you're interested, just talk to your physician, send in a start form, and we will figure out what your insurance is, and we'll figure out what the plan is. And I'll tell you, when I spoke with things about prior authorizations and appeals and things like that, we fight to try to get every patient on Viltepso, whether or not they fit the policy. And so we just have people really committed to that. So if you want, go ahead and send in a start form, we'll do the best we can to see what we can do for you.
Yeah, and Suzanne, I can add additional comment. So with the Viltepso program, we studied it in the youngest patient population in the Duchenne group for label, and also ex-US, we actually had 3 patients that were classified as non-ambulatory in our phase 2 label trial. So with that rich data package, we are able to advocate for the patient at the payer level. So.
Yeah.
And just going off of that question, kind of leading into the next is, so if a family is interested in Viltepso for their child, is the first steps then you say is to contact that support form and kind of reach out. Yep. And is there anything families can do in the meantime, you know, paperwork, speaking to their physicians about it prior that you guys could, you know, recommend or say? Or is it kind of just all in that support form?
So, Dr. Morgan, do you want to go first? You want to?
Well, I can certainly speak to how the sport program would go. So when the start form comes in, as long as we have all the pertinent information, and what I mean by that is the signatures and you know, the basic the insurance information, we'll know the benefits within 24 to 48 hours to get back out to the patient and the provider to let you know what your out of pockets would be. From then, often what payers are going to require is something called that prior authorization. Now that can take some time because the physician may need to gather information to fill that form out. And once that's submitted, then the insurance can take some time. So what you can do is just to make sure that you're communicating with NS support, that you're communicating with our patient engagement lead, because we will keep you abreast of every step of that because we understand time is of the essence. And so hopefully that answers that question. But Gardner, if you want to add to that.
Sure, yeah. So I'm going to go a little broader on this. Really tough conversation. There's a lot of innovation happening. There's a lot of trials going on. There's a lot of pressure to go into a trial, but unfortunately, a lot of those trials are 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 placebo controlled. So you as a parent or a caregiver, your choice is to go on a commercially available therapy that shows benefit, or potentially go into a trial where you could be in a placebo. So there's multiple factors that we want to give the proper information to both the physician and the caregiver / parent. To get the best information, it's best to fill out the start form, start that process, and any direction you want to go from there, we're happy to help you. But we do want to give you the correct information. And if you are amendable to a product that's commercially available, and that can delay progression or slow progression a little bit until there's really approved products on it, we're happy to do that also. So.
Completely agree there. For families that do enroll on Viltepso, is there an opportunity for them to get home infusions?
Yeah, so great question. Actually, I would say about 85% of our patients do home infusion. So that seems to be a really popular way, convenient. So yeah, we definitely do home infusion.
Great. Awesome. Well, I think that's kind of it right now. If anybody else has any other questions for the company, please let us know by dropping the chat section below, or we can send along the questions to the NS Pharma team and they can contact you directly. Again, I think this is just exciting time now. We're in the new space of, you know, approved therapies in Duchenne. I think it's really important for families to understand, you know, the background of exon skipping and if their child is amenable to these approved treatments that are available currently. You know, thank you again so much, NS Pharma, for all your support and help. I think this is a fantastic webinar. And for those of you asking, this will be recorded and available on our website in the next day or two. So if you didn't get to listen at all, or if you know any friends in the community who may benefit from this webinar, please feel free to share it with with the community as well. Thank you all so much. Give you guys a round of applause. But yeah, if you guys have any takeaways, but if not, we'll shut down this webinar and look forward to hosting one with you guys, hopefully in person soon again. So
There we go.
Thanks, Jet.
Can't wait for that. Stay safe. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
So much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.